Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to discuss the game played between Nodirbek Abdusattorov versus Magnus Carlsen, and the game is from the Tata Chess Masters 2023, and it is the round number 5. Total 11 rounds have been completed. The tournament consists of total 13 rounds, and currently after completion of 11 round, Nodirbek Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan is leading the tournament. So definitely it is going to be very interesting to check out the game he played against the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So it's going to be fun. So let's check it out. So Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces starts out the game with 1 c4. We have c5, knight to f3, knight to f6. So we have the English opening in the board on the board. So white played the move c4 and black responded with c5. It is more like a positional opening. If black wants to play an aggressive chess, he always go for the move e5. And it is an aggressive way to play against c4, the English opening. But c5 is also very fine to play a positional opening. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, e3, and here we have e5 by Nodirbek. The idea here is basically to cover the move d4 to stop this idea of playing d4. So we have bishop e2 by Magnus, and now we have d5 by Nodirbek. Opening up the center, definitely you have pushed e5, you have already played c5, why not to play d5? We have takes, knight takes, and short castle by Magnus. So basically following all the basic principles of chess. Bishop e7, bishop to b5, and here we have knight into c3 by Nodirbek. B to c3. So here's there's a reason behind why white didn't went for capturing the knight on c6 with a check. It looks like after b into c6, b into c3, it looks like many players thinks that the pawn on c6 and c5 are extremely weak, which is definitely a reason. But in the exchange, black is having the bishop pair, and which is a very strong reason for black having a good position in this position. So it looks like definitely black is having long-term weaknesses on c6 and c5, but in the exchange, just look at these light squares. Black can put the bishop on a6, getting control of the light square. Black can even push the pawn to e4, knight here, queen d5, bishop is coming to a6. It's already bad for white in this position. That is the reason white didn't want to give up the light square bishop. B into c3, and here we have queen to c7. And here we have d4 by Magnus. And again, it looks like why not to capture the knight? Guys, against this same thing, black can simply capture with the b pawn. Definitely capturing with the queen is wrong because of knight into e5, and white wins a free pawn. So yeah, b into c6 and bishop pair. This is the reason you should keep the bishop pair. There is always a reason behind it, because it's not a closed position, it's an open position. White can have the full control of the light square, and white is not having the light square bishop. So that's the reason Magnus have already castled, so he went for the move d4 because black king is still in the center. We have cd4, cd4, ed4, knight into d4. And after knight d4, here we have bishop to d7 by black. While the game was going on, I was watching the game, and there was a move that engine is saying that black can even castle in the position. Definitely castle is a fine move, but practically when you are playing the game, perhaps I guess white can simply capture the knight on c6, and after bc6 he can play bishop d3. And both the players are having the bishop pair, but practically speaking, the pawn on c6 is a bit weakness. It's an isolated pawn, which gives a good advantage to white in the long term, like queen c2, bishop b2 is coming in. So the c6 pawn is going to be always weak, and white would be the only player to push in the position. That is the reason castle was not played by Nodirbek. He went for the move bishop d7, a more practical approach. And here we have knight to f3 by Magnus. I was thinking of a move like queen c2 in the position. You cannot capture the knight because the queen is hanging, but again rook c8 is a good move. And now there are no good moves actually. If you try to play bishop b2, black can simply capture. And after queen into queen, we have knight We have knight to f3 check. First giving a check, making a white pawn structure a bit bad and now capturing the queen. And the position is equalish and black is having no real issues. So that's the reason Magnus wanted to keep the position alive. So he went back with the knight to f3, bishop to f6, and here, if black tries to capture in the position, now bishop b2 is coming in. The bishop is extremely strong and you cannot play bishop f6 because white will simply trade the bishop and black is also going to have a long-term weakness on the king side. So at the cost of castling first, Nodirbek decides to first put the bishop on f6 and the idea is to simply capture the rook. And he is thinking that Magnus will play the rook and he's going to castle and the bishop on f6 is safe, and now after bishop b2 he can even trade off the bishop and the position is fine. He can even continue with a6. So, but surprisingly after bishop f6, Magnus' idea was different. He went for the move bishop to a3, simply cutting off the black king and stopping the black king from short castling. So here Nodirbek decides to capture the rook. Queen takes and Magnus simply gave an exchange sacrifice. Now Nodirbek decides to long castle. Okay, because he can't do short castle because the bishop is covering the f8 square. So he has to do long castle. He went for the move long castle. So basically now it's a very straightforward plan. Magnus is going to attack on the queen side, and the queen side's all the files are opened up. So it's going to be a task for Nodirbek to defend the position. So we have rook to c1 on the board, putting the rook on the same file as the queen, king, and the knight. A very nice move. So Nodirbek first moved the king. Queen into g7. Magnus chopped off the pawn on g7. Rook to g8 by Nodirbek. He's offering either of the pawn on f7 and h7. Magnus can go for anyone, but he went for the move queen to b2 back. First of all, you cannot capture the pawn on f7. What is the reason, guys, what is the best move for black in the position that black can play? Okay, simple rook into g2 is winning the game because after king g2 we have bishop s3 check and eventually winning the queen. So that's the reason you cannot capture the f7 pawn. If you try to capture the h7 pawn, it's still fine, but after bishop g4, black is putting some real pressure. Black wants to capture the knight, you cannot capture because the pawn is pinned. So after a move like knight e1, now rook h8 is coming in, and suddenly it looks like the game is over. So yeah, Magnus didn't want to open his king, the files for the rooks, so he simply went back with the queen after capturing a pawn. Bishop to g4 still hitting the knight. Knight went to e1, rook to d1. So basically, definitely, when you materially up, you should always try to exchange as many pieces as possible. It's a basic rule of chess. Because in the end, you are an exchange up, you would be able to win the game. So we have a rook trade because you cannot move the rook because the knight is hanging. So you have to trade. We have bishop f1 defending the king, knight e5 by Nodirbek, h3 by Magnus, bishop to f3, a nice move. Queen to d4, rook to d8 hitting the queen moves to h4. Perhaps now Magnus' idea is to capture the pawn on h7 as there are no two rooks, so the rook can only take control of the single file. So we have bishop to d5 and now we have queen to h7 as I said. Bishop to c4, Nodirbek again want to trade the minor pieces as much as he can. So we have bishop b2, takes, king takes. And now we have queen c4 check. A good move. King to g1, knight to c6, knight to f3, queen into pawn. So basically now Nodirbek is having 2 pawns on the queen side. Magnus is also having 4 versus 1 on the king side. Bishop to f6 hitting the rook check. And now Nodirbek finally decides to push his a pawn. Knight to d4, queen to d5. If he tries to capture the knight in the position, it's a draw because of the queen check, king a7, now bishop takes, b6, and queen d8. and a repetition is white is going to give a repetition, and it would be eventually a draw. So yeah, that's the reason. Another big realized it, and he went back with the queen, trying to control some of the squares for the black king, so that it would not lead to a repetition. We have queen to c2, queen check, f4, and here Nodirbek decides to give a exchange sacrifice. And the reason is quite simple. After f4, the rook is hanging. So if you try to move the rook, for example, over here, now, sorry about that. But here comes knight into c6 check, and okay, the rook is also hanging. So, like for example, if you try to play a move like rook to f1, now still knight into c6 is winning, because after queen into c6, queen into c6, b into c6, h4, and the pawn is more powerful compared to the pawn on a pawn, and it's winning for white. And if you try to capture with the pawn, now bishop e5 leads to a loss of the queen and eventually lost to the game. So that's the reason after f4, black was kind of forced to capture the knight. Bishop into knight into pawn into, queen into pawn check, pawn push, queen takes. So finally we have 3 versus 2, and queen's endgame are very unbalanced usually in the endgame. Most likely it would end in a draw, because there are many situations where even after one side being 2 pawns, 3 pawns up, eventually there is a repetition and the game's in a draw. So it requires a very high knowledge and skill to play the queen endgame. So we have first h4 by Magnus Carlsen, a4 by Nodirbek, queen to a2 by Magnus. He wants to capture the f7 pawn, so Nodirbek push the pawn to f5, pawn push by Magnus, queen h8, takes, king to g1. It is still hard to win the game, so we have queen f3, going from the pawn on g3, king h2, queen check, and now we have queen e5, hitting the pawn. So here we have king f2, and here we have b5. If white would have went for the move king h2, still b5 would have been the idea. Black simply wants to push his pawn. That's it. So yeah, we have king f2, b5, queen here, and here Nodirbek now starts to move his king. Pawn push to g4, fg4, queen g4. So yeah, Magnus decides to trade off his g pawn with the f pawn, and he wants to see that would he be able to draw this position or not. But guys, actually this position is winning for black. The reason is, first of all, the queen is cutting off the king. The king is having a long way to reach the pawn. So basically, despite white starts to give it a large amount of checks to the black king, king is slowly going to move forward and push his pawn. So happened in the game, king b6, queen g8, pawn push, king here. It still requires very much skill. So queen check, again push, king here, check. A couple of checks were came by Magnus, but nothing was came. So after the move number 60, after playing b2, nothing was happening. Magnus was forced to resign the game. So after b2 on the move number 60, Magnus decided to resign the game, and Nodirbek Abdusattorov won the game, which definitely helped him to boost his confidence, and eventually Nodirbek is leading the tournament with half the point. So yeah, basically the reason Magnus resigned in the position is because if you try to give check, like for example if queen h1 check, you have queen check, and the queen would be forced to trade and black can make a queen. And if you try to give a check like this, now we have king to c2. And again, if you try to give another check like this, any check, now it would lead to a check and a fourth queen trade, and eventually black will make a queen and make the white king. So that's the reason. I would say a mind-blowing game played by Nodirbek Abdusattorov. Nice endgame technique, slowly and steadily. I guess the exchange sacrifice made by Magnus Carlsen, the idea was to definitely attack the black king, but definitely Nodirbek showed us a powerful defensive idea and some basic knowledge, fundamentals of chess, that we should always try to trade as many pieces as possible when we are materially up. So it's a very good lesson, and the tournament is going on, so I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this. So guys, I have posted this video after a long time because I was a bit busy. Sorry for that. But I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this now every day. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.